Ladies and gentlemen, fantastic episode today with my friend Valerie. She is an experienced entrepreneur through a lot of different industries, but stretching from consumer packaged goods all the way to venture capital and investing. She's worked at Incubation, and now she's currently the CEO of a brand that has started their business in the United States coming over from Germany. So expect to learn a lot about the consumer packaged goods industry, CPG, what it's like to start a small brand, what it's like to be a CEO, her leadership lessons, and everything in between. Friends, if you haven't subscribed to our podcast on all the channels that are out there, that would really be nice and helpful for us. Give us a subscription on YouTube. Give us a like. It encourages us and tells us that, hey, this content is meaningful for somebody out there. You're getting value and you want to see more of it. Additionally, all the places that you listen to podcasts, they have an opportunity to rate us with 5 stars. Don't give us a 4-star. Give us a 5-star. If you like it, share it with your friends. Let them know, hey, there's an entrepreneur out here that I really appreciate. He's giving out free value, and he's maybe where I am or maybe where I want to go in the future. So thank you, friends. Appreciate it. Enjoy the episode. Valerie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Alex.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Valerie, I was looking at some of the places you've been, places you've worked, things you've done in your career, and you got like a good laundry list of things. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
Sure. Currently, I'm the CEO in North America of Badesofa. Badesofa's literal translation from German is bath sofa, and it kind of sits in the intersection of health and wellness and home goods categories. It's like perfect blend. Um, Prior to that, I was pretty much an operator and a general manager my whole career. Geez, must have been 15 years now. Maybe more. I started originally in consulting. I'm from Russia, so I know that a lot of people asking me where my accent is from. This is it. Originally was born and raised in Russia, and then I moved here for a consulting project and never left. Got my MBA here in the US and pretty much transitioned after that to this brand management, general management, operator world, and I love it. I started from kind of really big consumer companies, so Danone and Ferrera, managing really big global brands, Activia, Light and Fit, Nutella, which is always getting people excited when I say that I work on Nutella because it's a very much of a love brand, and it was a really cool experience. And then I went smaller and smaller and smaller, and progressively more fun. So I went from large CPG companies into Series B startup called Freshly, which went through an acquisition with Nestle. And then I went even smaller into venture studio. So we would essentially come up with ideas and incubate businesses.
Hmm.
And I ran the consumer business parts of this. So any supplement brands, any food brands in the pipeline, anything kind of consumer related, that was me. Couple of really cool projects that came out of this incubator. And then last year, which is 2023, I pivoted into the Badesofa role.
What was it like being a business consultant in Russia?
Um, it's pretty much the same as being a business consultant here.
Is it? Is it really? I really don't know.
Well, so I think the interesting part about my work in Russia specifically is that I was very junior at the time, and that was my first job out of college. So a lot of it was, actually, a big part of it was really related to analytics and really crazy spreadsheets, formulas, and all of
Mm.
this fun stuff. But another part, and what brought me actually to the US, is because we were working with a client who were exploring launching their business, and it was a restaurant chain
Mm.
um, in the US. in New York specifically. So Russian-based business, but bringing it abroad and expanding their presence in the US, in New York, with a Russian-speaking population.
Interesting. Was it like a Russian style food chain, or was that not related?
It was a Russian-style food chain.
Mm. While we're on
Mhm.
the topic, are you a big lover of Russian food? Because I know some people, they're just like, my home country has the best food, but then some people are like, look, I realize there's better food in other places.
I mean, it's a comfort food for me, right? Like I grew
Yeah.
up with it. I'm sure you have your own things that's like you can't really objectively judge whether or not they the best. And it's not necessarily like old Russian food. It's the recipes that my mom would make, and it's
Mm.
more of nostalgia for me than it is, specific palate or something that I would say the best in the world.
Yeah.
But to me, it has a meaning.
One of the classic, like, internet videos, Gordon Ramsay and, Robert Irvine, they're, like, arguing with each other, and Robert Irvine is trying to say, like, some of the or no, Gordon Ramsay is actually trying to say, like, "The best food in the world is all in London." He's like, "6 three-star Michelin restaurants are in London." And Robert Irvine goes, "And what do they all cook?" And he goes, "They cook French cuisine." And they just both break out laughing. So it's like, yeah, English food, I don't really know about that. Okay, so this restaurant was trying to make a move, and they saw you as, like, someone who could help that process along. Where was your, like, role in that transition?
Yeah, my role was to come here, conduct the market analysis,
Mm,
and essentially both qualitative and quantitative, try to estimate the opportunity, try to understand the number one is there an opportunity? Should we launch it? What if we were to proceed it? What would the P&L structure be?
mm,
Would that even make sense? And if it does, then kind of the next phase of that project is always like, what's next? Like, how are we going to bring it forward? Where, how, when, and things like that. So, unfortunately, the project never ended up reaching phase three. I think, and it was a part of it. Of course, the project was very complex, but also part of it was the timing.
mm.
It was in 2008, in the summer of 2008, and as we all know, U.S. was not in the best economical position at the time,
Well,
and I think
New
that.
York was the epicenter also of the financial crisis.
Yeah, and I think that also largely affected the decision of, okay, well, let's put it on ice. I think they, after I left the company, I think they ended up actually launching something on a smaller scale. And from what I heard, doing okay, but it certainly wasn't, it was just not the right fit at the time.
What was that process like for you? You're going to a new country, and they're asking you to, like, "Hey, basically vet this enormous move for us. We're gonna become an international company, open up multiple locations." Did you feel like you were prepared for that? I don't know if that was what you were doing in Russia,
No.
or if they're just like, "Go get them, gal."
It was a little bit of both. It was honestly such a cool experience for me personally because I'm coming to a new country. Everything is like very, very unique and different for me. But at the same time, I'm working with Russian speaking
Mm,
chains, Russian speaking business owners. I made a lot of connections with like restaurant business and Russian speaking, specifically in New York, population in New York. So it was easier, I think, than if I had to do the same project for non-Russian speaking
yeah,
population, which I probably wouldn't be the right fit to do it.
mhm,
And it essentially was a lot of it was going from door to door and starting the conversation. Some of it was connections that were already made through somebody, or some of it was cold calling and trying to get any information that you can get, understanding their menus, understanding their prices, trying to look at rents in the area, trying to kind of put together the P&L and L and see like if that even makes sense, and then sending the data back to my team in
mm.
Russia to put together the decks and models.
Sounds like you were sort of really skilled in data, and then they send you over, and now you're like knocking on doors, calling people. Like this is not really like the data collection that you probably normally had done. But so how did
A
you
little
decide?
scrappy.
Well, that's great. Sometimes you got to do that, especially when you're early on. You got to get some of those moments of scrappiness to prove to yourself that you can do it. So how did you end up deciding, hey, I'm just going to stay in the United States?
Well, I think it wasn't the United States so much as New York. I think to
Mm,
me, New York, it has been my home for like 17 years, right? Or however many years. It's been a long time. And when I moved at first, like for this project, I was in Brooklyn, and which, of course, this is where Brighton Beach, Kings Highway, this is where kind of Russian population usually
mm,
tend to reside. So this
okay.
is where I focused on. But every time when I would take the train to the city, I remember getting off at Herald Square on 34th Street and just falling in love with the city, with the energy, with the people, the stores, everything. The smell of New York City. Every time when I tell that to people, and they're like,
Um,
I don't know, girl. But to me, it was just really special and it was so energizing. And I just fell in love with that place and I wanted to be part of it, truly. I think that New York has an unmatched energy, and that's what ultimately led me to the decision of, okay, well, I'm going to try to stay. I applied to a lot of different programs to go get my MBA,
mm,
and I eventually just kind of found my way. I knew that I knew what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to manage brands. I wanted to manage businesses in the consumer space. So that was very clear to me. I knew that
mm.
this is kind of my passion. And I eventually ended up kind of finding my way little by little.
So is that the path to stay in the United States? First is get an education.
To me, yes.
I have some friends. I played soccer in college, and I had some friends that were from various different countries, a lot from England. But they would have a visa to go to school for a certain period of time. But then once they were done with school, like that visa sort of ends. And I actually had a friend who like basically got deported because it was like 6 or 12 months after his schooling end, and for whatever reason he was not allowed to stay. How difficult was it to get like permanent residency if you've been here 17 years?
Um, it's been difficult enough, but eventually I found my way. Obviously, I'm a citizen now, and I have been citizen for quite a long time, but um, it wasn't an easy path, I guess, in the beginning.
Mhm. That's what I always
Uh,
hear.
yeah, there's different ways of doing it. Of course, studying the language was my first thing. Like even though I spoke English at that time, but being in a language school allows you to stay for a little bit longer while you're
Mm,
studying for the GMAT and all of that stuff.
interesting. Okay, so once education is done, then where does the career take you?
So because I was very clear on what I wanted to do,
Yeah, and also let's take a step back and pause there. How did you know you wanted to work in the consumer space? Because that's like our space, so I feel like I know a little something about it, and it's a fun industry, but it's unique, it's quirky, it's funny.
yeah, it's a good question. I think I knew that this is what I wanted to do even before I got into the consulting.
Mm,
Consulting truly was a really good training for me because it really allows you, like, teaches you discipline, teaches you numbers, paying attention to the numbers, understanding kind of the finance background
mhm,
of things. So I think it was a good choice for me, but I knew at the time that this is not going to be a long term um, thing for me. How did I knew that I want to manage brands in consumer space? I think it's because of all of the iconic brands, like as silly as it sounds, like brands like Disney and Mattel, which I ended up working for
mm,
Mattel for a little bit over a year while I was getting my MBA because it was such a iconic, truly iconic brands, and I was always interested in how do you build those brands, how do you operate the brands. So I kind of started, I think, my interest from more of a marketing and advertising standpoint, or like brand, I guess, less than advertising, more than advertising. But eventually that interest kind of transitioned more into like, okay, well, brand is part of it, but also operationally, how does that work? Building the team and importance of the team and how much really your team can make or break everything on the business. And I think that it kind of evolved. It started from that, like how do you build really iconic brands? And now over the years, it became more of how do you build a really sustainable business and not just a brand.
Mm. That is cool. It's fortunate that we get to work with some brands that we say it and instantly people go, "Oh, I know that brand." And it's like, yeah, I've seen sort of inside the belly of the beast. I know what that brand's all about. Like I know the people who are making those decisions. I know sort of like how they got there, a little bit of their timeline. I don't know any brands that are like 100 years old like Mattel, but it is cool to be able to have something that people recognize very quickly that you're like, yeah, I have like an intimate knowledge of how that thing works.
Yeah, I think for me, Mattel was my first brand, my first business that I worked on in the US after the business school, right? Actually, during the business school, what happened is I got an internship there, which was supposed to last a month. Then it
Mm.
was 2 months. Then, we're like, okay, well, why don't you stay for like another week or so? And then it eventually ended up being like a year and a half
Mm.
until I finished my degree and started looking for other opportunities. I think Mattel was phenomenal, but I wanted a little bit more of I was working in a licensing division in Mattel, and I wanted more of a retail exposure
Interesting.
and more of innovation part of things too.
Mm.
So that's what led me to Nutella at first, and then Danone.
That is probably one of the best parts about working in CPG is you get to try all these different products and different foods, and then you go, "Yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that." And we've been a part of just bringing some products to life that you try it and you're like, "Yeah, this is gonna be a good product. This is gonna be a hit." And
Mhm.
on that ground floor, I've tasted so many things now. I feel like I got like a good taste for the market at this point in time. And sometimes people launch products and I taste it and I'm like, who was tasting this? Because this is bad. Like if they'd have sent this to me, I'd have been like, you guys cannot
Yeah.
launch this. We're also we're also in the Amazon world. So the first thing that we do is we enroll it into Amazon's Vine program to get 30 reviews. So if I try it, like my mind instantly goes like, what are these reviewers gonna say? And if like it's not good, like I know the reviewers are not gonna be kind to you. They're gonna just hammer you
Hmm.
on the taste.
Oh yeah.
What was life like at Nutella?
Um, Nutella was really my crash course on how to manage the business. I
Mm,
started on a brand as an assistant or associate brand manager, whatever the title was, as an ABM. A lot of it is again doing analytics, but also understanding the performance, understanding how to build retail relationships, how to make a forecast, and kind of more of a business. So it's really interesting because every time when I tell people that I started in brand management, they a lot of people assume that it's like very heavy media and advertising and brand, right, and
mhm,
more creative. It is not.
mhm.
None of these things. Of course, you work within agencies, and part of my role was managing, media agency and creative agency, and social agency. But truly, it's more about business performance and managing the team.
So I'm really versed on sort of like the digital side of things. Well, at least Amazon. We're not website people. Like you don't want us to run the Nutella website. Like I tell people that right off the bat. But how does a business like that or a business like Dannon think about their various different market segments? Like how do they think about like retail versus C stores and things like that? Were you specifically on retail or even more fine point than that, like retail but Whole Foods?
No, so the brand team manages the business as a whole.
Mm,
And then so there is different kind of the structure is brand team is sort of a leader of the business side, so we drive the demand. So
okay.
your responsibility is to generate the demand and forecast the demand and make sure that the rest of the team can support you in meeting that demand.
Mm.
So there is brand team, and then there's sales team. And when it comes to brand team, I work across all channels and all retail partners. So whether it's a C-store or Whole Foods or Albertsons or whatever, we kind of work as high level as possible, but also working with sales and activating specific things in the account. Like if Albertsons is running, I don't know, Activia challenge. I'm just making things up. It's not Nutella related, but Activia challenge was a big retail occasion, for example. Then we work with specific accounts, specific sales team to make sure they have all the tools that they need, the pricing and kind of brand materials and so on.
Mm. So, what do you see as the difference between a small CPG brand and a brand like Danone or Nutella? Like, what are those big brands doing that the smaller brands are not doing?
Um, well, I mean, there's a couple of things. I would say most of the big businesses have direct sales force, which what that means is that when it comes to retail relationships specifically, right? So that means that they have their own boots on the ground. They own, let's say, Walmart. There is like 5, 6 people who just work on Walmart.
Mm.
They have direct relationship with buyers. Most of them live in Arkansas, and they
Mm.
part of Danone, but also they very much embedded in Walmart. They know what's going on. They know kind of what they need, what strategic needs of Walmart are, and able to communicate that strategy back to like me and say, well, you know what, Walmart's initiative is this. How can we make sure that we're feeding into they kind of strategy? So at the end, they would give us more space, more promotional opportunities. There's a lot of different things that kind of come out. Like if you meeting them where they want to be. So I think
Mm.
that's a huge advantage, to be honest. And then of course a lot of like companies like Danone and Ferrera participate in planograms with buyers.
What is that?
So uh, planogram is so usually in food, and they're actually in most categories, but let's say food. There is a couple, 2, 3 reset windows where the shelves being rearranged essentially, and the buyer is making the decision how many facings, who gets how many facings, like how many facings the Activia gets, how
When
many
you,
facings
what's
Nutella gets.
a facing? That's not like an end cap. That's going to be what, like a position on a shelf?
Yeah, it's like think about the shelf, right? Like the shelf has like 10 slots. Let's say like the width of the shelf is this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the screen cuts it off. Like let's say this is the size of the shelf, right? And then you have 10 slots on the shelf. Like how do you decide who's getting
Right.
2 facings versus three
Ooh.
facings versus
Right.
one facing? And then very important, who's getting on the top shelf, who's getting in the
Ooh.
middle shelf, who's
Eye,
getting on the bottom shelf.
eye level, right?
Right. So of course there's a like obviously there is better positions, and the more facings you have, the more impact on the consumer you have while they like browsing the shelf for like literally 3 seconds.
Mm.
So companies like Danone and Ferrera always going to have more power in those decision making and influencing the buyer decision, not just because it's a big company, but because they're really able to work very closely with the buyer, with Walmart, Target, Albertsons, whatever, to tailor the strategy to them so everybody wins.
Mm. So,
And the small companies just don't have that.
so they're not buying that position necessarily,
No, I wouldn't use the word buying those positions.
but they
Of
are
course,
putting things in front of the vendor that they know are going to be appreciated or liked. And then maybe if you are doing things like paying for end caps, does that help the process along?
well, paying for end caps and other kind of retail opportunities within the store is a totally different story.
Mm.
There is occasions and this is all usually per pay per play. So like you have to pay for the end cap, whether you're a small company or big company. Of course, there's a lot of negotiation power that you can have as a big company, but it's still a paid investment. Like it's not something that the buyer just gives you. Like being in different mailers, sampling events, like
Mm,
that's all obviously additional. But I wouldn't say that's like being listed or positioned on a shelf or the face number of facings is paid. It's more, I think, about being able to give the buyer an opportunity to sell more.
mm,
Because what the buyer is interested in is velocity of the category. So
yep.
like if I'm a buyer for a yogurt category at Target, I have specific numbers that I'm looking to hit in terms
Mm,
of velocity per week, per store, per day, whatever.
interesting.
And if I'm, as a salesperson, able to show you the data and show dollars behind, like, okay, so we as a brand, sorry, let me backtrack. Let's say Walmart salesperson comes to us and say, you know what, we really need to boost velocity at Walmart. That's going to ensure that we're getting an extra facing in the next reset. They're going to take new products, whatever, get this velocity to this level. So that means that I will go and figure out, okay, how can I get that velocity up? Like, is there
Mm,
specific promotions, whether it's like working with Walmart directly or just activating around Walmart locations, or it's putting extra media like TV concentration around Walmart stores that kind of drives the demand. There's a lot of different tools that you're able to leverage, but at the end of the day, it's always a communication between the sales team, the buyer, and the brand.
sounds kind of stressful, to be honest.
It's really fun.
Yeah. Okay. So you work with a couple of these brands, but then you do full time at Dannon, but then you move to a sort of a smaller company, correct?
That's right. After Danone, I went to Freshly. Freshly is a direct-to-consumer food delivery service. It's ready to eat. And by the time I joined, I think it was definitely post Series A. It must have been approaching the race of Series B, so it was already pretty sizable place. I think from the employee standpoint, it was about 100 people on a team.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so it was already a decent size. Of course, for me coming from Danone,
It's quite large company.
yeah, and my role on the Freshly team specifically was to um, essentially figure out additional business opportunities aside from uh, ready-to-eat meals.
Mhm. So
So ready
were they selling ready to eat meals into stores at that time, or is that just direct to consumer?
direct to consumer.
So they were not really in stores.
They were not in stores. Um, and part of kind of my role was to figure out what is the right next step, kind of what does the innovation look like, what does the additional business line look like. Part of it, of course, like channel strategy and things like that. And we ended up launching snacks and
Okay.
desserts
All right.
as an additional business line, and that's the line that I would also manage kind of as part of the role. So
Mm,
it's an interesting structure because on one hand, it's part of Freshly, but also a business on its own with its
right.
own P&L. And we are able to tap into some of the resources of Freshly, but also operating independently.
Mm,
We had to establish kind of slightly different supply chain relationship and things like that. Like our warehouse was in a different place than Freshly's was.
So it sort of sounds like starting a whole new business. You have a name, but really the business is start from scratch.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. You have a little bit of resources, and of course, the name and the power of the parent company, of the parent brand. Well, I think the most important thing that you get from the parent company is access to the consumer base that Freshly already has, because I
Mhm.
think that's the most important thing, and this thing that you're always struggling with the most when you're starting out, like acquiring new consumers, and like how can I get these first 100 users, 200 users, How can I build my mailing list? And, at Freshly, I think the benefit of starting a business within the business is, of course, you have access to all of these customers.
So what was your process to try to build that business?
Well, step one, figure out what's what's the right solution is, right? We had a lot of different ideas. I remember doing so much exploration of what is it, snacks and desserts. Is it there was I'm not going to share, but there was a lot of other potential opportunities that I think were also really exciting. But then you kind of do the analysis of effort versus the potential opportunity and kind of the ROI calculation. I think that snacks and desserts made the most sense from that standpoint. And from there, it's kind of starting the business from scratch, figuring out what the hell the product looks like.
Mm.
Does it have to be refrigerated? Because Freshly's meals were always refrigerated,
Mm-hmm.
and which made complexity, obviously, from the shipping standpoint. And it was fully vertically integrated, which means that Freshly owned the facility,
Oh.
production facility,
Mm.
which is a very unique attribute. And it's good because you have full control over your quality and things like that, but also you can't react to things as quickly because there is a capex involved, and
Mm.
then you can't like just go and buy a new machine just to test something out.
Right.
So that was I remember, big decision of like, okay, does it have to be refrigerated? Can we ship something shelf stable? Do we need to manufacture our own snacks? Like, does it have to have a Freshly label on it, or can it be just partner snacks?
Mm.
That was a big conversation too, because what Freshly is known for is food. It's healthy, better for you, kind of comfort, ready to eat meals. And when it comes to snacks, it's like, okay, well, we know that it needs to be healthy, but does it need to have Freshly label on it? So I ended up, at least to start, sourcing it from other businesses. So it was really interesting process, because I essentially would go to different trade shows like Expo East, Expo West, things like that, and try to I tasted as many things as I possibly can taste. So like what you just mentioned to me is like, yes, that resonates. I tasted
Yeah.
a lot of things in my life.
Yeah, but by the time you're done with Expo, East or West, you're just like sick to your stomach. You're just like,
Awful.
you walk past one more thing and they're like, would you like a chocolate covered licorice stick? You're like, dude, I cannot eat anything else right now. Like, your product might be great, but I cannot do anything.
Yeah, I think that the key is don't get greedy in the beginning. Just like
Mm,
take a little bite.
yeah.
Sometimes it's just a smell. Sometimes you just need to read the ingredient and see if this is even like something
Mm,
that you would introduce in your portfolio. Don't taste everything just for the sake of tasting it,
mhm.
and don't go there hungry.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, you'll fall off a wagon very quickly at those expos, and then you go and people are like, "Let's get some drinks after work." So before you know it, you're just like, "I haven't eaten any real food today, and now I'm having a margarita." So like, here we go.
Oh yeah. I haven't gone to Expo East or West in the past like few years, since I kind of out of that category. I was in supplements before, and now it's home goods, so it's kind of not as relevant anymore. But before that, for gosh, 10 years, I would go to all of those things.
Yep, I was at the Anaheim one. Just I guess I don't know. It's probably 6 months ago now.
It's in March usually.
Yeah. So you decide that the snacks that are your own are the way to roll out. Now, are you thinking to yourself, "Hey, I've got a background in retail. Let me push these into retail," or is the team just like, "Hey, we're like a direct to consumer brand. Like we're just gonna try to sell these direct to consumer"?
All of these were considerations and conversations. There was a lot of thought put into it. At the end of the day, direct to consumer was just our bread and butter. This is what we
Mhm.
do. People order meals because it's convenient. It's something that arrives to your door. You don't have to think about it. You put it in a fridge, and then you either use it for lunch, for dinner, whatever. And I think that a big part of launching a business within a business is that you need to always consider kind of a point of difference and the advantage of the parent business, the parent company, right? And if ease and convenience is a big part of it, fitting into this was very, very important.
Mm.
So retail wasn't the right fit for us in the beginning, definitely not for snacks and desserts. And the idea was to essentially make healthier snacks and desserts more accessible, delivered to your door. You order in the meals, and then you can choose to add on snacks and desserts, and you can do it weekly. You can skip a week. That allows you to try a lot of different options, decide what you like. So I did something really interesting on that business because I started as sourcing partner snacks, so not private label, but actually taking brands like Lesser Evil or whatever, a lot of very not known brands at a time, and
Mhm.
just introducing them to the box. And each box kind of came with a little insert that described each snack, why we chose this. So it was all very much curated. Why is it healthier than anything else that you can buy in a store? So a lot of it was kind of like relationship with those other brands, but also providing value for other customers where we sell them something that's convenient but also tastes good, and you get to discover something new and something better for you. And what's really interesting thing that I implemented is each time somebody receives the box, they also get a link to kind of a rating system, like
Mm.
kind of like a survey. We're not asking them for long form reviews or anything like that, but just rate each snack. Did you like this one? Was it too salty? Was it too sweet?
I see where you're
Uh,
going.
and that data collection is like, never underestimate the importance of data.
Mm. So I think it's a really smart way to launch that because first, you don't really have a ton of risk, right? This brand is probably super excited, like, hey, they're approaching us and
Hmm.
they want to buy, 20 cases and just start implementing it in their meals. This is
Yes.
great, profitable for them, pretty quickly profitable for you. If it doesn't work, all you do is you pitch out the 20 cases, and then you're adding profit to the actual transaction, gathering data, taking very low risk until you decide to make that actual jump into, hey, we're going to make our own snacks. We've already proven we can sell snacks to people. If they, wanted to buy someone else's snack, like, it seems reasonable they would buy our snacks.
Yes, and you know exactly what people like and don't like, right? You understand there are certain snacks that I personally really love. Others thought that they taste like dirt, and that's what consumers eventually told us. Don't send me any more of these guys, but
Mhm.
these is a really, really good batch. Like, keep sending us more of this. I had a person on my team who was I think she was doing it weekly. She would essentially compile a box. She would literally pull the samples of all those different things, lay it out in the freshly box, with the insert, kind of with the write up, and then like for approval. And then I would usually not taste the snacks again, but at least like look at it. Like, does it look aesthetically interesting? Does it have enough variety? Like, does it implement the feedback from the previous rounds that we received? And that was really, really valuable.
Mm. That company goes on eventually, though, to become acquired by Nestle, correct?
That's right. It was eventually acquired by Nestle.
So what was that? Were you there when they were acquired by Nestle?
I left right before that.
Did you see the writing on the wall?
Well, I mean, I think every time people say writing in a wall, they kind of it has like a negative connotation to
Yeah,
it.
well, I mean, I guess I don't know if you left before it happened, right before it happened, that kinda to me said.
No, no, it was actually really exciting. It was just coincidental that I departed the company for a different opportunity, but it was actually a really cool experience. Obviously, we kind of had a lot of preview that this is going to happen, right? Like, a lot of, and
Mhm.
nothing is definitive, but you kind of know that this is where it's heading. And I mean, I think it's really exciting for early people because we all had equity in the business, and that's why acquisitions like that are really, really cool.
Mm. So,
That's
what
why
do you
you join the startup.
right, absolutely. So what do you think that Freshly did correctly to get to a point where Nestle wanted to acquire them. That's sort of like the dream for most startups, right? Is to get acquired by your P&Gs, your Nestle's, or your Kellogg's, or something like that. What do you think that they had done to get to that point that so many startups just never are able to do?
Well, I think three things. One is Freshly was truly an expert in D2C,
Mm,
in the direct to consumer space. And at the time, it was 2019, I want to say.
okay.
So obviously, that was kind of the peak of the D2C,
Yes.
right? And for Nestle, D2C capability is really, really valuable, really important, but it's also not their core. What Nestle is really good at is retail distribution,
Mm,
really strong retail partnerships, being able to expand your channel distribution. This is what they're really, really good at. Innovation also within the consumer space category, but not necessarily D2C like
yep.
websites,
Yep.
Amazon. Like it's not really what they good at. So that capability is really important. But I think what made Freshly stand out from some others is the fact that I mentioned that it was fully vertically integrated, which means that they own their own facilities. I
Mm,
think it's a huge advantage when it comes to the meal production and delivery because you're not relying on third party commands.
mm,
You have your own you're able to implement your own quality control, your own recipes, especially as the business scales. Who knows what happens to the commands, and that happens a lot, right? Like
mm-hmm.
it's a risky situation at scale. So having your own facility, I think, de-risks that a little bit. And I think another part is, yeah, I think that's probably the
Yeah.
biggest ones
Yeah, I think that those are two
that I
really
can say.
important things. Direct to consumer. I know, as you stated, the data cannot be understated how important it is, overstated how important it is. And if they have all those customers that they're regularly shipping meals to, I'm sure Nestle was like, we could probably do something with this data too.
Yes, actually, this is exactly the point that I just forgot to mention. You brought me back. The data that's like closing the loop on that. Exactly, because the reason why I kind of implemented snacks this way, but the whole Freshly infrastructure, the whole Freshly company was really built on the importance of data and the
Mm,
use of that data. So everything was very meticulously tested. Everything was very meticulously recorded for the next time. So there was none of this like, well, we tested this and now nobody remembers what the result was. Now let's test it again. So it was very structured in that way. And I think that for a company like Nestle, that data was really, really valuable.
So Freshly eventually closes, though, correct?
Freshly eventually, well, I guess Freshly facilities still operate as far as I know, but I think they were acquired by a private equity.
Oh, so Nestle went like, we kind of want to move along from this.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really truly speak to what played in that situation. Of course, I have my own hypothesis, but I don't think that's the a place for me to share that.
Right. That I guess is always sort of that's like one of my fears about my company is that you get really excited because you're like, hey, we can do this acquisition, right? Like for us, it wouldn't be Nestle. It would be like some bigger aggregator, just maybe a PE firm who wants to like move into e-commerce sales. But you wonder like, what is this company going to fundamentally look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? And whereas you, the founder, you're like, I want this company to exist in 5 years. It means something to me if this company
Yeah,
exists in
it's your
5
baby.
years. Yeah, like a firm, like, generational equity, like, do they actually care if your business, like, is in existence in 5 years? Like, probably not. Like, if it's not profitable, I get it. Like, they're probably just gonna, like, shut it down. Or even like, "Hey, it just doesn't fit into our growth strategy." It's just like, "Hey, we shut it down." So that's always, like, my big fear is, like, what is the life of the employee gonna be like if this business does go through a fundamental change in ownership.
Yeah, but I think for employees standpoint specifically, Obviously, founder has different emotions involved in it, I think, in a business, and a lot of employees, of course, also connected to the business on many, many levels.
Mhm.
But I think from the employee standpoint, it's always a really, really cool experience. It could be a roller coaster. It could end up good. It could end up bad, but it really doesn't matter because it's an experience.
Mm.
And in many cases, it's like kind of a one of a lifetime experience to go through the M&A, to see, like when I was at Danone, White Wave was acquired.
Mm.
And that was a really interesting thing to kind of see how, like, what goes into it, and even how a giant like Danone manages it, and what are the things that they cannot quite manage exactly perfectly. I thought that it was a really, really interesting experience, to be honest.
Mm. Well, so interesting that
10 out of 10.
you end up working with, for, in conjunction with a firm that sort of does equity injections into brands, specifically in like the CPG world. Is that correct?
Yes, FIFA Ventures is an early stage VC firm and an incubator.
Okay.
So we invest in small, early stage businesses, not
How small we talking?
early stage, so pre-seed, seed, not even Series A, truly.
Okay. So for those
Uh,
not like super well versed in the funding world, do you want to just like maybe quickly like explain what do those kind of terms mean?
yeah, pre-seed, seed is anything. So like Series A is when you're raising capital, you already have full traction, you have product market fit, you have a really good plan, and all you need right now is a capital to scale.
Mhm.
So you kind of there, you build, you experiment it, you kind of know what happened, and now you need an infusion of capital to just grow. It's usually spent on marketing, on inventory, on innovation, and expanding the team, things like that. In investment rounds before that, which is where 5-4 usually play, um, you want to have product market fit, but you still have a ton of room to experiment and learn. And sometimes the product and the team could really change between the seed investment and Series A. And I think that, it's kind of like all different firms do it differently. um, Obviously, with investing in a seed round and an early stage round, you get a bigger upside, sorry, if you invest in Series A, Series B, and so on. So like later rounds, less risky because you kind of already see where it's going. Um, Earlier rounds have more risk, more reward.
So how did you think about investing in brands? Like what were the things that you were looking for that you thought were good indicators for possible future success? Obviously, you're early on, so you never quite know, which is essentially what you're saying. Like you're investing so early that it's like it's a bit of a gamble, obviously. Like it's not a sure thing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of different things. One is understanding of the demand, and does the product meet that demand? So that kind of early indicators of the product market fit.
Mm,
So does the product has the right to exist? Does it fulfill the needs of that demand? So is there any traction? Like sometimes in very early stage, it might not be even like, if they pre-revenue, you can't really tell, but they have some feedback from customers, from retail accounts, from whoever. So that's kind of already indicating some of the pattern there. The category, how big is the category? So like, what is the size of the opportunity? Um, if the category is super small and you're one of like million players there, so what is the model going to look like?
mhm.
um, and vice versa, if the category is huge, of course that's more interesting, and if the category is growing, I think it's even more interesting. And I think another part is the team.
Mhm.
You always, especially in the early stage, founder, I think, is one of the most important contributing factors to success, of who is the founding team and who they already have on the early like who they already brought on board early on.
How would you go about thinking about uh, looking at the founder? Like, what criteria were you sort of looking for in the founder? Because I've found in my hiring and terminating at our company, it is really tough to tell like who is going to be the right fit for what you're looking for. I imagine a founder is even harder because you're asking this person to do so much more for this business.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to evaluate. I think ultimately some people have better maybe feel for it. Like some people just like able to guess it, but I think there are certain things that objectively just like statistically that's go have better chance for success. Like for example, um, if it's not the first time founder,
Mm-hmm.
you have a better chance of like probability of success. I mean, I think it makes sense, right? Because that person already went through it, and whether or not their business was successful in the first round, like it actually doesn't even matter, um, because they already went through it and they kind of know what to expect. I think that track record is huge. And from the record standpoint, actually, the founding team that has more than like it's not a solo founder. When you have 2 or 3 founders, tend to be more successful. Of course, I'm using very general
Yeah.
terms. Like there's a lot more that goes into it. But if it's not a first time founding team and there is more than one of them, like let's say 2 or even 3, depending on what the company is, 3 might be not always the right size, but 2 founders, let's say, I think that's already a bigger point.
So when you were working there, were you vetting companies? Were you like looking for companies? Like how is that process fundamentally work to even begin to find these companies? Or are they like really hurt? They like want money, so they're like reaching out.
Well, so majority of my work was done on the VC studio on the incubator side.
Okay, so you're actually working more with brands after they come in.
Yes, I mean I did look at some investments as well, but no, my role was more in incubating the businesses. So
Mm,
venture studio means that you essentially acting as a co-founder to the business. In our model, we would come up with ideas. Of course, there were like specific theses usually of like what kind of we want to ideate around. But let's say it's a health and wellness, gut health, and you kind of have a number of ideas. Um, we test them. We had different approaches to testing them. A lot of it was done, at least in the beginning, kind of a high peak of D2C, literally just putting out landing pages, like
mm,
doing a mock-up of the product, putting out landing pages, driving ads to it as if the product is ready to order. But then, once kind of measuring that funnel, what is the cost of like what is the
mm,
cost per million, like what is the cost of the click, like how many people actually like landing on a page, like how much time they spent on that page, the heat map of the page, like where did people click, kind of like all of those things, how many people added to cart. And then of course, like once people go to complete checkout, like it's not going through,
mm.
and we just put them on a wait list. But it's not a perfect science, because you cannot always tell like how many people would really complete the checkout. But a
Right.
lot of times, just like the ads, and the interest, like how much traffic you're driving from those ads into the landing page, could be a good enough indicator of like, okay, well, there's something interesting in this product.
Mm. But at that point, the the company's already on board, right?
No, so the
I
company,
see.
yeah, so the company doesn't exist.
Well, but like your firm is already involved at some capacity by the time that you're gonna run that ad.
It's all us, yes.
Yeah. So do you ever get an ad and you go, "Ooh, this doesn't look great. I'm not sure about this one."
Well, so we creating those ads. We had a team. I had an agency actually who would do those
Mm,
ads based on my brief. So it's kind of like launching the product before it's launched. So you think about what you want the product to be, what you kind of like aiming for, and
mhm,
then they would put out that ad. You have full control over what you're running.
I gotcha. And then you eventually leave that business, and now you're the CEO of Badesofa.
Yeah, so it's pronounced Badesofa,
I knew it
which
was gonna be poor, but I wanted to give it a try.
yeah, which is not intuitive for the English speakers.
Mhm.
So we get that a lot. But it's called Badesofa, and the literal translation is bath sofa.
How did how did they find you or you find them? How did that work?
Through the VC connections.
So were they involved with that company, or it was just people knew each other?
No, there is another place called German Accelerator.
Oh.
They invest in German-based businesses, but they also don't necessarily bring capital, and they just make connections
Mm.
to the founding team, and specifically, like if they want to expand into other countries, like in this case, United States, they kind of help to make the connection. And between the German accelerator and my previous VC connections, we kind of found each other.
So talk to me about what point you entered that company and what it's been like being on board there.
Yeah. So let me think, where do I start? So the company started in Germany a few years ago. Um, and it was founded by two phenomenal women, Natalie and Annika, who essentially created the product like in their house. They experimented with it a lot. They both had expertise in two different kind of areas, um, finance and marketing, and then more of like manufacturing and engineering and fabric
Mm.
sourcing. So they complemented each other really well. But I think what's really accelerated their business in Germany was participation in Shark Tank Germany
Mhm.
in 2021. So that really propelled the growth of the company forward, and they saw incredible traction and incremental growth over the next 2 years after Shark Tank. And
Mm.
I think the next logical step of like, okay, well, EU business is huge, but there is an opportunity to expand that business in another continent, and US market just kind of lends itself really nicely to it, because I think health and wellness market in the US is, I mean, it's the biggest health and wellness market.
Mhm.
The demand is very much there, and I think that bathing culture of self-care is prominent, and it's going to continue to grow based on the all of the forecasts that we've seen. So it was a next logical step.
Mm.
And the team kind of experimented a little bit with how do you approach US market. They tried to ship from Germany. Just by the way, the product is really bulky and
Oh.
really voluminous. So when I say the flagship product is bath pillows,
Mhm.
but it's pretty sizable, because it's very different bath pillow than anything that you can see on the market. It's kind of designed to really give you a feeling of a couch inside of your bath.
Interesting. So you have to have kind of a big bathtub?
Not necessarily. It comes in different sizes. People who do have large freestanding bathtub usually benefit from buying the full set, because that really allows you to like lay out the full sofa experience in a
Okay.
bathtub, and that's really incredible. But even if you have a small standard bathtub like I have in my house,
Yeah, that's me.
I use it. I use it all the time, and I only use the back pillow in my small bathtub. But I think I could also occasionally benefit from using a back and a foot cushion. It's really just a matter of kind of preference.
Mm.
So it's designed to really fit any size of the tub, and comes in different dimensions for the back cushion.
I'm a bath lover. I'll admit it. Like if I have a free evening, like I don't have like a podcast or I'm not like doing some form of training, like I'm gonna take a bath.
I got into bath really when I was pregnant. And even before I was pregnant, I think, like as I was like kind of, no, I think it was my first trimester. That's where it started. You probably don't know, but you're feeling really yucky the first trimester. You're really looking for any opportunity to kind of relax and feel a little bit better. and a friend recommended to me taking baths,
Mm,
and I started my weekly Sunday night ritual of bath
mm.
with a
All
cup
right.
of tea,
All right.
reading a book, and it really was so powerful for me. And I kind of continued that throughout, like for the past 3 years now.
Yeah, if I'm like scrolling through houses on like Zillow, I'm like, do they have a bathtub? Do they have a bath? Oh, they have a nice bathtub. I'm like, all right,
Hmm.
okay, all right, maybe. Um, so they were launching the product in the United States when they brought you on.
Yeah, they were toying with the idea of launching, and they were kind of preparing to launch. And when we started talking, I was generally really interested because I think the product is very unique. Like it kind of
Mm-hmm.
fits into the category on its own, and I think that it's kind of like a little unsexy category, right? It's bath pillows. You don't necessarily think about aesthetically pleasing things or premium things in that category. Um, no offense to Amazon, obviously, we're also on Amazon now, but
Definitely. It's going to be a
majority of
different
our
product.
competitors are there.
Yes,
Yes,
it will be a certainly very different product on that platform.
yes, and it's usually under $25, and they all kind of look the same, feel the same, and it's just not a great experience, or not like a premium experience, I would say.
Hmm.
So Badesofa really reinvented the category when it comes to it. So if you look at the pillow, it's truly voluminous. It's meticulously engineered because it supports your entire kind of head, neck, back, and you can sink in and just really relax in a bathtub. It's weighted, which means that it's not floating. It's not like kind of, if you're readjusting, if you're grabbing a cup of tea, it's not just like slipping away and then you're really uncomfortable. It's literally staying right there.
Mm.
So the product is very well thought through. The category was really interesting, really unique. Of course, I did my own analysis, like kind of coming from the industry of investing. It's kind of how you're looking at it, right?
Hmm.
Um, would I invest my time essentially and bet on that business? And you do the same exact analysis. What is the category? What is the growth in the category? What is our opportunity for the market share? What is my revenue opportunity? Like kind of doing the whole thing and just talking to customers. Is there product market fit? And ultimately, it was a no-brainer decision after I did that analysis and put together my own model just to compare to
Mm.
what the estimation looks like. And it was actually pretty similar.
Mm.
Um, and at that point, I came on board and said, yeah, let's do it. So I launched that business in the US. US is its own entity,
Got it.
but Germany is a parent company, so we fully integrated global business. But I manage North America,
Mm.
and they continue to manage the EU market.
So what about manufacturing? Is it manufactured in Europe, or did you have to start by sourcing manufacturing here in the United States?
We have our own manufacturing now in the United States,
Mm.
in Mexico, actually, in North America.
Interesting. Yeah.
We started last year. We started sourcing from EU manufacturer, which is where German team continues to source, and they have their own facility there. But supply chain of bringing it through that, like, yeah, you're probably familiar with the process. That was really
It's
painful.
so
It's really
tough.
costly.
Yeah, it's so tough. You always wanna go, "Yeah, well, we'll just start, buying it from the UK where it's made," and before you know it, it's been, like, 5 months since you ordered the product, and you're like, "Where is it?" You're like, "It's at customs." Like, "Well, why is it at customs? It's been
It's
there
always at
for."
customs.
It's 45 days later, it's still sitting
Yeah.
at customs, and you're like, what are they doing with it?" And you have, like, no visibility, like, when is this actually gonna get through
Yes.
customs? Like, what do they want? Sometimes it gets to you and boxes are opened, and you're like, "What's going
God
on?"
forbid you're being pulled for an inspection, then you definitely never know when it's getting out of inspection, and then you're getting hit with a bill for sitting at the border while it was inspected.
Yeah, at least that
That happened
product
to us last year.
that you have is non-perishable. I mean, we do
Right.
perishable items, and sometimes they have we did a brand out of the UK, and they had a 12-month shelf life, and I'm like, 12 months, no big deal. Like, we sell 12-month shelf lives all the time. But we'd get it and it would be like 5 months later or 4 months later, and they manufactured it 2 months before they shipped it to us. It's like, this has 4 months of shelf life. Like, we can't even sell this on Amazon now.
Yeah, even
So
Amazon has like strict guidelines on the shelf life too. I don't know
yeah,
what it is, but
it's like 105 days past the useful life. So
so you
useful life.
basically have like 2 days window
Yeah,
to sell.
exactly. And they'll ship you your inventory back when it hits that. So let's say, like,
Oh yeah.
useful life could be 30 days for an item. So you got 135 days that you got to get to have that ability to sell. So if it expires in 165 days, 30 days after I shipped it in, they're sending it back. They're like, no, it's under the useful shelf life plus 105. So then you shipped all this glass mustard into Amazon and they're just shipping it back. It's broken. It's like not expired, but it's close to expiration. It's a nightmare. So
I mean,
it,
all of it sounds very familiar. Like when I
yeah,
feel your pain in many ways.
I would.
You're also working with Amazon, which is like really hard to work with, in my opinion, at least. You guys probably nailing this and know how to work around it, but I found it really, really painful.
Well, it's job security. For the harder it gets, the better it is for us, because exactly your point. Brands go like, "Gosh, we don't want to deal with this thing." So we're like, "All right, well, sometimes it's frustrating for us too, but like that's what we do. We're good at solving those problems in the matrix." So it's helpful for us every time Amazon puts a new requirement on. It stinks because we're like, this makes our job harder, but I'm like, it's a good thing, guys. It's good. It's helpful for our business long term. So,
Yeah.
what was the strategy to get this product out into the market? Because brand new product, different country. I've never even heard of this category up until now. So, how are you beginning that process? Not to mention, it also seems like you put yourself in these pressure filled positions too, like CEO of a company that's launching in the United States. I mean, that sounds like a lot of responsibility.
I mean, it's fun. It's obviously ups and downs, and depends on like which day you're asking me. Sometimes, I would scream in a pillow, and sometimes like jump around and skipping around because it's so exciting. But ultimately,
Mhm.
there is a lot of things that I'm really looking forward to. I'm really excited about on the business. The business is growing. There's so much opportunity. Um, I launched it last year. So the first sale was in September 1st. That's
Hey.
when we went live, which means that we had our distribution in place. So the 3PL, we had the website built, agency in place for ads, kind of a marketing strategy there, forecast for what we're actually aiming for the rest of the year. And from there, it was kind of test and learn, test and learn. Literally every day, we discover something new and adjusting the strategy. I think in the beginning of this business, it's been 12 months almost to the day,
Mhm.
right? A little bit more, and so much learning, so many different things. So yes, it's a lot of pressure, but I think it's like a good pressure because it's really exciting.
Mm. Have you been leaning heavily then on that direct to consumer model? Is that where you feel like you're at home, you can collect the most data, you can learn the most about the business?
Yeah, right now we 90% D2C and about 10% Amazon.
Hey,
I think that next year Amazon might be a 15, maybe even 20% of the business,
all right.
but I'm gonna kind of cap it at that,
Ooh.
because I think that the biggest opportunity for us is really on the D2C front. And then eventually there is plans and already kind of conversation for the B2B expansion and distribution and retail and things like that.
Mm,
But I think that D2C is going to continue to be the core of the business for a really long time for many reasons.
mm. Yeah, and the retail is probably a little bit different than the food retail business, right? Because
Very different.
looking at very different, I don't even know who your primary retailers would be. Um, like, I was
Yeah, that's
Bed Bath&
exactly
and
what it
Beyond, but they're gone. They don't even exist anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to figure out right now. So there's a lot of specialty retailers that we fit really nicely in,
Mm,
whether it's the home improvement, like bathtub distributors, for
mm,
example, home builders, kind of like a more premium versions of Home Depot. I think it's really fits really nicely in
mm.
our categories, but also health and wellness,
Yeah.
spas.
Yeah, makes sense.
wellness centers, hospitality. That's all on the table. And you're right, it is very different from the food category where you kind of know exactly, okay, you're selling chocolate sauce. Okay, you feed on this shelf. This is your potential pool of retailers. This is your buyer. This is if you want to work with a broker, here's the brokers that you already know kind of who to go to and how it's like a playbook that's not easy, but it's like known,
It's
right? Like you
established.
there is a path, right? Exactly, established is a good word. Like you know where you're going with this because we're really creating the category, and it's a good and bad, right? Because there's no competitors, which is always yay. There is no competitors, but also because we're the only ones, we have to reinvent everything
Well,
and educate consumer about it.
I would also think that the market is much more fragmented. Like if you get into Walmart, it's like, okay, we did it. Like this is a business in and of itself, like a huge
Yes.
potentially for a lot of brands, or Whole Foods or Costco or any of those large retailers. Whereas if you get into someone like Crate and Barrel, it might be like, okay, well, this is like
Five
good, but
stores.
yeah, it might not like actually change the business fundamentally. Whereas getting into Walmart or Costco is going to change the business in an enormous sense.
Yes, definitely. And you're always, that's why I think the D2C is going to be just a big part of our business for maybe forever. Because if you think about then the effort of selling product in the retail, right? Like like Walmart is you making basically the same amount of work as selling it to like a specialty retailer somewhere in
Mm,
LA that has
yeah,
like two stores.
yeah.
And your opportunity at Walmart is just so much greater. So I think that's kind of also why I'm not prioritizing it as like a first thing. But I think eventually it's a good opportunity to have exposure in retail. Um, Sometimes people want to see and touch the product before making an investment. From the brand standpoint, sometimes being associated and being even placed in certain retailers gives you a halo effect that's really
Mhm.
valuable. So a lot of this investment is not something that you're going to see in ROI right away in terms of kind of your velocity boosted sales, but it is going to pay off in the long run, the longevity of the business.
Mhm. How big is the team there?
In the US, all of my team is fully remote and it's mostly contractors and
Mm,
freelancers, one agency partner, and then I have two people in my team in the US, but they're based in Germany.
mm. I
And
asked
then
Go ahead.
the EU team is about 15 people.
Mm. I asked that because it seems like you've been a part of a lot of teams, you've been a leader at a lot of teams, and leadership's a big thing for me, just hearing from various different leaders, how they think about managing their people and staff and teams and what are their do's and don'ts. So, maybe talk to me about what you've learned about leadership and the kind of core values that you think about when it comes to leading and managing people.
Yeah, I think that uh, it's always important. The few things that's really important to me. One is transparency as much as possible. You cannot always be fully transparent with your team for the greater good,
Mhm.
but as much as you can provide in terms of any forecast, potential successes, but also any like potential issues like, hey guys, I don't think this contract, like there's a risk that this contract may or may not close. This is potential consequences. Let's be prepared, and kind of keeping everyone in the loop of what's going on in the business, because I think that creates a lot of more ownership for everybody on the team
Mhm.
if they know pieces that they don't necessarily wouldn't have been involved in otherwise. So I think there is a huge value in transparency.
Mhm. I agree.
Um, and I think another interesting thing is what I try to implement even in my team right now is, even though it's like a lot of kind of it's a truly a blended workforce, right? Some full time, some agency, some part time. I try to manage them as one team
Okay.
and really facilitate that teamwork. Like we were just in New York a couple of weeks ago all together, brainstorming and thinking about the 2024 strategy, but then also just taking the time to have meals together and drinks together and like kind of get to know each other on a personal level.
Mhm.
Because I think that especially for being fully remote, it's so hard.
Mm.
It's like I'm not gonna always jump on a call and like spend the first 30 minutes of 30 minutes call like talking about your family and where you grew up and kind of the background. But I think those personal connections really, really add value to the team. And I think it's extremely important. And this is something that's like it's almost a line on the P&L for me for like next year and the years to come of just like in-person events and opportunities to
Mm.
get together, just build personal connections.
Yeah, I actually had someone on the podcast a couple of weeks back, and this was the whole premise of his business was like connectionship is what he called it, where it's like leader
Mm,
through connecting with your people, but also like
mm,
fostering a environment where everyone can collaborate and connect. And it was really interesting and it made a lot of sense. I think it's hard to do in the remote setting. And then we're in person. So we have 37 people walk in and out of the office every single day. So, like, sometimes people are like, "I've had enough connection." Like, like, maybe I'm gonna work from home for a day or 2 to, like, alleviate some of that connection. But I think there's pros and cons to both of them. We love working in the office. I think it's been a great thing for our company. But yeah, I think you hit on 2 of the my 3 top things for leadership. Transparency is one of them, where you just need to tell your people what's going on as best as you possibly can. Consistency is the other one. So
mm,
applying the rules in the same way, shape, or form, applying the
mhm,
standards in the same way, shape, or form. Also, like when it comes to transparency, is like setting the rules very clearly. I've been really obsessed with this guy, Dan Martell, recently, and he wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. But the story he tells is like he was counseling the CEO, and the CEO is like, one of my employees is just like not doing a good job. And he's like, okay, well, like, what training did they receive to do the job in the way that you want them to do? He's like, well, like they got some in-person training. He's like, okay. Did they get any like formal training? He's like, no. He's like, okay, so what's the standard that they have to hit? And he's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, where's the written standard they either hit or didn't hit? Like, where is the area of the business that they are in charge of taking ownership of? And he's like, yeah, like that's not fundamentally outlined anywhere. And he's like, yeah, this person's not missing anything. You're the one who's like missing something. Like you have not outlined to your team what the expectation of success is. And I was like, oh man, gosh, that's so good. So
mhm.
consistency, transparency, and the third one for me is just connecting with your team. So you hit on 2 out of 3. So I love it when leaders say similar things to what I think, because that helps me say that, hey, maybe you're on the right track with things.
Yeah, I think that to your point, like expectations, it kind of like to me it goes together with the transparency because to me the expectations is that KPIs that you as an
Mm,
individual team, as an individual performer and as a team needs to hit. Like we
mm,
all have a KPI of a revenue, we have a KPI of a profitability, but then each individual team member um, knows what their KPI is, like whether it's from the PR standpoint or from the performance marketing standpoint. Some of them are harder to define than others.
yeah.
Like, for example, the social, organic social. I have a person who manages organic social, and it's so damn hard to define what her KPIs
Mm,
are.
mm,
Like, I found it really, really difficult because, like, I like to measure, tie every KPI to the business performance, right? Like, which is essentially the top line, bottom line.
mhm.
Like, how do you do it with organic social? So I came up with like a really back strategy of like what her KPI might be, and we'll see how it goes. This is the first year I'm trying it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think what you're sort of describing is like long tail brand, right? You're trying to build the brand, and the
Yeah,
best
but
way to
how do you measure it? Like, I don't want
right,
to wait 5 years to see like did we build the brand?
right. The best thing that I've heard about this, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense, is essentially like your brand equity is the excess amount of margin you can charge your customer above
Hmm.
like a replacement competitor. So like Nike can charge you $120 for a pair of shoes, but if you saw like a no-name brand, you'd be like, I'm not paying $120. That's ridiculous for those shoes. Or a pair of shorts, they're like
Yeah.
69.99 for a pair of Nike shorts. And you're like, all right, well, that makes sense. But then you walk into Walmart and they're like 15.99. You're like, that gap is essentially brand. That's like what that is. That's the excess margin. Now, how do you track it in the short term? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up tracking. I think what you're saying is like fundamentally really, really true because it is at the end of the day, like how much. like how elastic or non-elastic your brand is, your demand is. And that's like a lot of that is coming from brand. And when I say brand, like usually when I use the word, like the term brand, to me it's not just like purely marketing and advertising. Brand is like everything. It's the quality of the product, it's the package in which it delivers, like it's the speed with which package gets delivered, it's the return policy, it's the customer service, it's literally every touch point that consumer like experiences. This is part of the brand.
Mm.
So it's really hard to measure, especially when you're in the early stage and you kind of want every investment that you make, whether it's in people or in initiatives, you want to see ROI. But brand is really, really hard to kind of like put that price on. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, well, we're gonna measure the follower growth, and kind of just call it a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tough brand building. Well, Valerie, this conversation's been phenomenal. You have so many interesting insights. I really appreciate taking some of your time. Where can people find you? Where can people find the products? Catch up with the things that you're doing.
Yeah, Badesofa.com. It's Badesofa. I'm
I
literally
will.
typing it on my
Well, I
fingers
will
on my
link it.
finger right
Don't worry. I will link it.
And we actually offering for this podcast specifically. I would love to offer a discount code
Oh yeah.
for listeners. It's podcast 15.
Awesome.
If you can link that as well, I think I would love for people to experience it. And my name is Valerie, last name is Khayutin. Please, if you want to reach out, if you a customer, if you want to be a customer, I mean, I'm kind of a open book. Always shoot me an email. I respond to customer emails myself. Sometimes I call customers. Especially, this is the luxury that you still have at the early stage, and sometimes even at the later stage. I think it's really important. So a lot of the, whether it's positive comments or negative comments, I read them and I take them into consideration. So
Awesome. Thank you, Valerie. Well, you got one person who's going to use that code, which is me, because I'm going to give it a try.
enjoy the bath.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Life changing. Thanks, Alex.
Awesome, Valerie.